Every day he walked the halls alone, just a janitor to most. No one noticed him, until one girl did. In a forgotten basement room, she found a photo, young, strong, brave, and realized the janitor had a past no one knew. The school gathered. Whispers turned to applause. As he walked on stage, they stood, for the hero they never saw coming. Now the greetings came first, the nods, the respect. He hadn't changed, but the way the world saw him had. Framed in the hallway, a photo and 7 words. Some heroes carry mops, and he carried them with honor. At Roosevelt High, the hallways were always buzzing, filled with teenage chatter, the slam of lockers, and the hurried footsteps of students and teachers. But amid all the noise and motion, one figure moved quietly, almost invisibly. His name was Mr. Thomas, the school's janitor. To most, he was just the cleaning guy, a man in his late 60s with graying hair tucked under a faded cap, pushing his mop cart from hallway to hallway. He never interrupted conversations, never asked for attention. His uniform was always clean but worn at the edges. His eyes, a dull blue, rarely met anyone's gaze. For the students, he barely existed. For the teachers, he was part of the background. Except for one girl. Lena Marshall, 16, had transferred to Roosevelt High just 2 weeks prior. A quiet student with a love for photography, Lena noticed the small things, like the way Mr. Thomas always straightened the library chairs even when no one thanked him, or how he paused in front of the war memorial plaque outside the principal's office, staring at it for a second longer than anyone else ever did. One Thursday afternoon, Lena stayed late to work on a photo essay for her journalism class. As she walked down a quiet back hallway, she saw Mr. Thomas pushing open the heavy door to the basement storage area. Something about the way he looked over his shoulder, almost cautiously, made her stop. She waited a moment, then slowly followed, camera hanging around her neck, curiosity tugging at her heels. What she found down there would change everything. The basement beneath Roosevelt High was dimly lit and cluttered with forgotten science fair props, broken desks, and cardboard boxes taped long ago. The air smelled of old paper and floor polish. Lena stepped softly, careful not to make a sound. Through a crack in the storage room door, she saw Mr. Thomas. He wasn't cleaning. He was sitting at a small wooden table, hunched forward, holding something in his weathered hands. On the table sat a simple picture frame, its glass a bit smudged, its edges chipped. Inside was a black and white photo, a young soldier in full combat gear, standing in front of a helicopter, rifle slung across his chest. The face was unmistakable. It was Mr. Thomas, only decades younger, standing tall, with fire in his eyes. Lena's breath caught. She gently knocked on the door. Mr. Thomas looked up, startled, but his expression softened when he saw her. For a moment there was silence between them, one filled with meaning. "Is that you?" she finally asked, pointing to the photo. He gave a small nod. "A long time ago." "But why is it down here?" she asked. He shrugged, then looked back at the photo. "Not many people ask about the past. It's easier to stay invisible." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the man everyone ignored, the one who pushed a mop but once carried a rifle. She printed the photo she'd taken of the frame and added a simple line of text. "Do you know who mops your floors?" The next morning, she pinned it to the student bulletin board outside the cafeteria. No name, no explanation, just the image and the question. By lunchtime, students were gathering around it. Teachers paused and stared. Whispers turned into questions, and Mr. Thomas, still mopping the east hallway, had no idea that the quiet life he'd carefully built was about to be turned upside down. By the next day, the photo had gone viral, at least within the walls of Roosevelt High. Students who once walked past Mr. Thomas without a glance were now pointing and whispering. Teachers exchanged confused looks. Some recognized the face in the photo, but few had ever connected it with the man pushing the mop cart through their classrooms. In first period history, Lena's teacher brought it up. "Anyone know who put this on the board?" she asked. Lena hesitated, then raised her hand. "That's Mr. Thomas. He served in the military. I followed him into the basement. There's more down there." That afternoon, with the principal's cautious permission, Lena led a small group of teachers and students down into the storage room. Mr. Thomas stood off to the side, uncomfortable but not stopping them. Inside a dusty box under the table were medals. Not just one, but a row of them. A bronze star, a purple heart, a folded flag in a glass case, and faded letters addressed to Staff Sergeant M. Thomas. A counselor with military family began to cry. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" a student asked. Mr. Thomas gave a faint smile. "Because I came home and no one asked." Later that week, Lena decided to dig deeper. She spent evenings researching his service online. She found archived news clippings, fragments of interviews, and even a photo in a military blog describing a 1972 rescue mission in which Sergeant Michael Thomas had carried 3 wounded soldiers out of a burning village in Vietnam, despite being shot in the leg. She printed everything, brought it to school, and laid it all out on the front table in the library with a new sign: "The Hero in Hall C." What followed was an extraordinary shift. The student council proposed a formal assembly to honor Mr. Thomas. The principal agreed, though initially hesitant, worried about setting a precedent. But the pressure from both students and staff grew too loud to ignore. On the day of the assembly, the gym was full. Not for a pep rally, not for a basketball game, but for a man no one had ever truly seen. Lena stepped up to the podium. Her voice trembled but didn't waver. "This is not a story about war," she began. "It's about silence. The silence of those who return, uncelebrated. The silence of hallways we walk every day, where heroes mop our floors while we scroll our phones. Mr. Thomas didn't ask to be noticed. But now that we see him, we can never unsee." When Mr. Thomas was invited on stage, he walked slowly, visibly uncomfortable with the attention. But when the students stood, every single one of them, and began clapping, his shoulders straightened. For the first time in decades, Staff Sergeant Michael Thomas saluted a crowd that finally saluted him back. After the assembly, something changed at Roosevelt High. It wasn't loud or immediate, but it was real. Like a curtain had lifted and people finally saw the hallway for what it was, a place where stories walked beside them. Mr. Thomas was no longer invisible. Students began greeting him by name. A few started showing up early to school just to help him with morning cleanup, asking questions about his time overseas. Lena noticed how he answered sparingly but smiled more often now. He never glorified war. He simply spoke of service, of the men he missed, of the silence that followed them home. The history teacher invited him to speak to class, not about battles or medals, but about the return, the years after, and the weight of being forgotten. The classroom was silent during his talk, except for the occasional sound of someone quietly wiping away a tear. Soon after, the principal announced that the school would rename the community room in his honor. What was once the multi-purpose hall was now officially the Thomas Veterans Room, a space for reflection, remembrance, and service. But perhaps the biggest shift happened in the hearts of the students. They began asking questions, not just about Mr. Thomas, but about their own grandparents, neighbors, and the people who kept their communities running. The quiet janitor had started a ripple effect. One week, Lena's journalism club published a feature called Faces You Don't Know. Each page told the story of a cafeteria worker, a crossing guard, a bus driver, all people who had been passed over and underestimated, just like Mr. Thomas. And every morning, without fail, Mr. Thomas still pushed his cart through the hallways. But now he was greeted with nods, waves, even a few thank yous. Not because he demanded recognition, but because a group of students finally understood what respect looked like. He didn't ask to be a symbol, but quietly, steadily, he had become one. Months later, Lena walked through the hallways of Roosevelt High, camera still slung around her shoulder. But something was different now. Every time she passed Mr. Thomas, they shared a nod, an unspoken acknowledgement of a story once hidden in plain sight. One morning, just outside the Thomas Veterans Room, she noticed something new on the wall. The same black and white photo of young Sergeant Michael Thomas, now carefully reframed and placed beside a bronze plaque. Below it, a simple inscription read, "Some heroes don't wear capes, some carry mops." Lena stood silently in front of it. Around her, students passed by, some pausing to read, others reaching out to gently touch the frame. Mr. Thomas never changed his routine. He still arrived before dawn, still mopped the floors with quiet diligence. But the way people looked at him, that had changed forever. And though he rarely said much, one day he stopped by Lena's locker, handed her a small folded note, and walked away. She opened it. Inside were just 7 handwritten words. "Thanks for seeing me. Truly seeing me." The world is full of quiet giants, people whose stories are buried beneath years of silence and dust. Sometimes, all it takes is one curious heart to uncover a lifetime of courage. So look again. That quiet figure in the background may be carrying more history than you can imagine.